What's up? How y'all doing? Tsukumonger. And this is the Emerson CQC 13. And this knife is so damn aggressive, it comes out tip first. I like this thing. I'm a big fan of this knife. I bought this knife. The reason I was mostly attracted to it is the shape, right? That blade shape. It's just sick as shit. There isn't enough manufacturers out there, designers designing that recurve buoy shape, right? It's just a clip point blade design, but it's that recurve buoy shape like this. Recurve clip point, excuse me. See, I'm even doing it. That recurve clip point shape right here has been kind of more and more recently. I'm hearing that a buoy blade shape and a clip point blade shape are different. You know what I mean? You can almost classify them as a different shape. This one would be a buoy blade shape, right? Flat on the thing would be a clip point. That's a recent trend in knives as far as I'm concerned. And I'm a big fan of it. That's really my favorite blade design just because it is so aggressive. It does really offer a lot of utility. Generally, you've got a large amount of belly with this sort of blade shape. And it's just so damn pointy. You know what I mean? You're going to encounter a lot of resistance coming into material. You've got so much belly up front, you know what I mean? That ease of the curvature actually sinking into material is all going to be pushed up against that belly, right? And so your penetration with this knife it's going to sail into material quite well. It does have a decently reinforced tip. It's thick, but there's not a whole lot of material, right? So there is a little bit of a risk of breakage, but it still does have a decently stout tip. Excellent blade shape. Saber ground. It could be a little bit higher. Honestly, the grind could be a little bit higher. It does have a it's pretty acute, I guess. I don't know, coming in, you know what I mean? But I really do like the Emerson chisel grind here, you know what I mean? Only ground up on one side, it's on the cutting edge. It's excellent, especially up on the tip. It gives you just an excellent scraping profile. This knife is the best knife I own for cleaning my fingernails. It just flick shit out of there, right? I'm a really big fan of this thing. I like the fact that Emerson does, you can see this is number 2211, so they number all their knives. I don't really know what that corresponds to as far as, is this the 2211 Emerson CQC 13 ever? Is this just the black coated blade? You know what I mean? Is that this run? Is that, I don't quite know what that means, but I do like the fact that they serialize their knives. It kind of sucks this one doesn't have a date on it. I know that the older Emersons used to date them. This one doesn't actually have a date on it, but look at the blade, look at that black coating, right? I've beat this shit up. Done a lot of carving with it, and you can see here, I think it's interesting, it's a double coat, right? You can see there's like acrylic, there's like a clear coat over the top of the actual black coating underneath, right? You see that right there up at the edge? So I think that's one of the reasons that it's holding up so well, is whatever is over top of the actual black coating is just hard as shit. You can see there's a little bit of marring on it, but I mean, I've put this thing through its paces. It came with an extremely early lockup, right? And I will say that about this thing. This is like a high-end 1911 as far as a break-in period. It was gritty. I mean, I wasn't expecting anything, you know what I mean? I'd watched enough videos, read enough things about Emerson online that I really wasn't expecting too much as far as fit and finish. You know, I was expecting a decent knife. You know, I had my own expectations, and they were pretty much matched exactly. But it did come gritty. It did come with a really early lockup. I'll get into that in a second. You know what I mean? But it's smoothed out, right? It is not easy to move. There's a lot of resistance. It's really hard to move back and forth, but it's very smooth. There's no grit. There's no nothing, right? I did take this thing apart, cleaned all the the grease and the gunk out of it, and I oiled it up, right? And I cleaned it out again, and it runs better dry. I run this thing dry with no lubricant at all, and honestly, I think it's smoother. It runs better. It's got less resistance than it did when I used the Benchmade Blue Lube in there. I think it might actually be reacting negatively to the washers in there. So I don't know if there's some type of negative reaction between Benchmade Blue Lube and the washers, but it definitely is a hell of a lot smoother running dry, and the space between the actual blade, right? Look at how fat those washers are. Bring an 810 Contigo up for comparison here. The space between the actual blade and the liners themselves, look at that shit. There's a Spyderco Manix 2. There's almost no space right there on the Spyderco Manix 2, right? This has got like, I mean, that's like a 1/16 of an inch of space, right? And that's not good for modern aesthetics, you know what I mean? What we look for in a folding knife. Great lines, you know what I mean? We want the perfect fit and finish, the great lines, all of that. This knife, it really isn't trying to do that. It's got room for clearance. It's got room for space, you know, built like an AK-47. You know what I mean? There's so much room in there for dirt to move around and be beaten around that it can be full of dirt and still operate. You know what I mean? It's still going to move around even though it's gunked up. You know, it's still going to be smooth. You know, I really like that design. I don't like the fact that the pivot, or the actual stop pin right there, the way this thing is designed is the stop pin doesn't go all the way through the liners. It's recessed, right? It's got a little recess, like it's narrowed down, right? And so it's just sitting in the actual liner, like in the little cup, right? It doesn't go all the way through the liner. It's just kind of sitting in it like that. And I don't actually like that design. It just seems, I mean, there's obviously a reason he did it. You know what I mean? Emerson, he obviously knows what the hell he's doing. He's famous for it, but I just don't quite understand it. You know what I mean? But I do like the steel and titanium liner, right? It gives a good weight. I mean, there's a great weight distribution on this knife. You can still have that big beefy blade, and you know what I mean. It's got a great weight proportion, and I know that a portion of that is because the liner itself is heavier. That steel liner on this side is going to be a little bit heavier, so it's going to offer a better weight, right? And in the hand, it just feels better. This thing isn't the nicest thing to give a really good squeeze to, but it definitely feels good in the hand. The one thing I will give this thing is security. The way it's got that really big dog leg pommel coming off, the choil for your finger, and this really heavy guard coming up, right? The way it's just designed here with this curvature in the back and the flat front, it sits in your hand. It's not the most comfortable, right? You know, if you read their website, it's like it's built for your hand. It doesn't feel like that. If I can give this thing a really good squeeze, right? Press down on it. I mean, you can see the marks in my hands. It's nothing like if I did it with this fucking Contigo right here, you know what I mean? I give this thing a really good squeeze, and it beats you up, you know what I mean? It's not on that same class. It's not something you want to be carving with for a really long time, but it is comfortable in the hand, but it's not going anywhere, especially with a slash cut, any sort of retracting motion, pulling motion in this direction, not in a piercing direction. Most people overlook that in a defensive knife. You know what I mean? They think as long as you have stopping protection, as long as, you know, from penetrating thrust, you're good, right? No, that's not the case. The knife can be pulled out of your hand in this direction as well. You give a good slash cut, it gets stuck in material like that. All of your momentum and all of your weight, right? All of your pressure is still moving, right? And if this blade stops and you don't have proper protection from slipping off that blade, you just lost your knife. It might be stuck in a guy, stuck between his ribs, whatever, but you still don't have your knife, you know what I mean? So having this extra security, having this locked into your hand is just great for that tactical purpose, that fighting purpose, you know what I mean? It's definitely good for that. The blade design overall, what I think it really would excel at, honestly, is skinning, right? It's just got so much belly on it, and that translates pretty well to the tactical, you know what I mean? The defensive aspect of it's going to cut through meat like nothing, but it's got a whole lot, you know what I mean? I really do like that blade shape, right? This thing came with an extremely early lockup, right? To give you an idea, see if I can actually line this thing up, right? When I first got it, lockup was sitting like that. It was barely on there. Now it's almost 3/4 of the way down. See that? Let's see if I can get a good shot. You see that? That it is pretty engaged, right? And that's a positive and a negative. You know what I mean? It's a negative on the aspect of it takes away the longevity of the knife. You know what I mean? It's gonna wear down on the actual lifespan of the knife, but it gives you a secure lockup. You know what I mean? It's very secure. I don't know if this is true, but I've got a theory. If you're familiar with how Thompson operates, right? Thompson submachine gun. I can't remember the name of the action, but the way that the actual lockup works, right, is a steel on brass connection, and the connection under pressure between the two different materials gives a lockup, right? And I'm wondering if that's the same thing with titanium and steel knives, right? It does deformate the titanium more, but under an extreme amount of pressure, is there any sort of lockup? You know what I mean? Is there any sort of engagement between the two materials, you know. I think that may be the case. I mean, that transfers over to all titanium lock knives as far as just that overall security. I don't know if that's one of the reasons they do it. I do like the thumb disc. I didn't even mention that. The Emerson Wave works really well on this thing, but yeah. All of the other aspects, things they transfer over to other knives, and I'm running long on this video. I want to say I love the fact that it's got standardized hardware. I didn't think I would be as big of a fan on that as I am with a knife, but I really am a big fan of that. Yup, that's it. Y'all have a good one.